Good evening, and thank you for joining me on Right Now. I'm Ann Vandersteel. Tonight, I'm bringing you a story based on treasonous acts that started with a massive national security breach and warning that even though it was presented to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police with detailed scientific evidence, it was totally disregarded, followed by human trafficking and corruption in the courts, all the way to the highest court in the land. Maureen Steele with the People's Operation Restoration and Dale Richardson with the Karis Project are featured as their stories are not just endemic to the United States of America, but it's happening in Canada, as well as many countries around the world. The intersection of their two stories exposes the dark underbelly of the court systems, the Department of Homeland Security, Child Protective Services, and both the Canadian and United States government's failure to protect the people when real evidence was presented on corruption, treason, human trafficking, and threats to national security. Interestingly enough, the Colorado court system, integral to this story, which has also proven to be a highly corrupt when it comes to their efforts to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, is implicated in facilitating theft, human trafficking, as well as a complete abandonment of your Fourth Amendment rights to privacy. Once again, the public-private partnership and collusion tramples on the rights of the people. The story will open as we define what human trafficking really is, then prepare for the horror for what is to come.
To celebrate the new year, we're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save 60% on our Goose Down comforters, the best comforters ever. They go perfectly with our MyPillow bed sheets and duvet covers. Save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels. They're made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. Our seasonal flannel sheets are finally in. You save up to 50% and they sell out fast every year, so order now. They're truly the best flannel sheets you'll ever sleep on. Or save up to 80% on all our clearance items. And this is where it gets even better. For a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Many of you have been asking, where am I getting the energy from? Where is the glow coming from? What's changed with your hair and skin? Well, simply in the last month, I started taking a product, C60 Evo. If you go to c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel, you too can get radiant energy, mental focus with C60 Evo's ESS 60. What is it? That is pure C60. Get that increased flexibility, immunity, and longevity. And guess what, folks? It's not only for people too. You can get some for your pets. My animals are on it now. And that's right. I'm having trouble keeping up with Vegas, my dog, who I like to go on long walks with in the morning. He is battling back on the heat down here with his C60 Evo as well. Go to c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel and try their delicious oils that you can eat and add into salads or put on your food, and also incredible facial serums and creams that are making a massive difference in the texture and feel of my skin. c60evo.com/Ann Vandersteel. And joining me now, Maureen Steele with the People's Operation Restoration, back again, organizing like nobody I know, and Dale Richardson. Both, by the way, are victims of the criminal cabal, the court system, the government, and frankly, the kingpin of human trafficking himself, Joe Biden, sitting there and squatting in the White House, and Justin Trudeau up in Canada. The level of evil in this story is frankly unmatched to anything I've reported on in a long time. So thank you for being brave enough to step in front of the camera and get this critical information out. I want to start with you, Dale. Can you help me understand the definition of human trafficking? Because I'm traveling a lot and seeing human trafficking signs all over the place. And people just think it's, bodies that are being moved around for forced labor and sex. But what is the big comprehensive definition of trafficking, and why is that treasonous?
Well, the human trafficking has a couple of things. One is like involuntary servitude when you're forced into doing work or if you're forced into providing a service, or you could be driven into a state of peonage, which means just made broke, or you're being exploited in some kind of way for financial or sexual means, whether you're an adult or a child. And primarily, men are not sex trafficked, they're financially exploited. They're driven into states of peonage, like in unlawful manners, and it is explicit in Title 18, where they talk about the improper use of the courts, so they could be civil or criminal, or the threatened use of it. So you can do something that's unconstitutional to take away somebody's money, like, for example, the family courts, which are routinely used to drive men into states of peonage where they can't protect their families, and then they incentivize the women to not be in the relationship so that they can have single parent families to then go after the children. The CPS are being used whenever there's an exchange of money in an unlawful manner, then that's material benefit, and that is where you start getting into the racketeering laws. So you need to have certain elements that are there that most people don't realize. They think of just what is shown on TV, somebody getting thrown in the back of the van and driven away, right? You're
Right.
seeing the elements of this stuff in the schools when they force this pedophilia on the kids. This is also elements of trafficking because it's facilitating the sexual and financial exploitation of the children.
Right. Thank you for that comprehensive definition. Maureen, you and your husband have, sort of had a media firestorm the last 6 or 8 weeks based on this explosive story that involves previous relationships. You and your husband have been married now for over 10 years, but he was divorced prior to knowing you and went through the process, had alimony and child support, was paid in full. In fact, he overpaid. And that was recognized that if they ever went back to court with his ex-wife, she'd owe him some money, a significant sum of money, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But that story didn't end there. It ended where it began again, where she decided to take him back into court. Give us a brief overview, because this story, your story, overlaps into the corruption in the Colorado court system, which is where it intersects with Dale's story in the Colorado court systems, but it also involves trafficking and, frankly, the usurpation of your privacy, exploited by your husband's current employer, who was being told to garnish your husband's wages when the ex-wife took him back to court.
Yeah. Yep. So we haven't even been back to court. That's what I think is what everyone needs to know. We have never set a toe in a court, and there has been no hearing. The divorce was finalized in 2011, and unbeknownst to us, Shannon Baumgar-Serena, John's ex-wife, filed in March that John owed $311,000 in back child support and alimony, which was 100% false. We weren't served or notified. We got notice in August of 2023 when we got a writ of garnishment and a verified support order that was only verified by Shannon. And they garnished John's wages for 55%. And that $311,000, they tacked on 12% interest. So it ballooned to $311,000. And so 55% of his wages were garnished within 5 days of us receiving the notice. There was no chance to fight it or anything. And we were rendered homeless almost instantly. We had a debt load we were carrying, and with 55% of his wages gone, we couldn't pay rent. I mean, it was game over. So, and we were already dealing with the poisoning from where we lived before. So it's been brutal, and we've been fighting it, and giving the truth to David Lamb, Shannon's attorney. And they just didn't care that there was another agreement that was witnessed by 2 lawyers and a therapist, that Shannon paid for half the therapy appointments when we went, all because of the harassment and the constant nagging for money. It happened in 2017. We went bankrupt from all the demands, and she agreed that he had already grossly overpaid. She was making 6 figures in her own right. We guesstimate from Glassdoor that she makes about 400 grand a year, and her net worth is over 2.5 million. So she's made us homeless and devastated us financially. John will be 60 next year. And so that's what happened. And unfortunately, his company, Spy Cloud, that he worked for, that he no longer works for, was complicit in this. We alerted them that the writ of garnishment wasn't signed by a judge. It was signed by a clerk, that there was no order from the judge allowing the clerk to sign it, that It was all based off fraud and perjury. And they never looked into it, that John had no due process. And they applied applied Colorado law to it. And because the company is in Texas and John's a Texas employee, they had to apply Texas law. And they didn't. And so, now they're in trouble. And what made it worse was the senior legal counsel, you just can't make this up, senior legal counsel Lisa Salinas at SpyCloud, when John tendered his resignation, less than 24 hours later, she took it upon herself to write a note to John's ex-wife's lawyer and tell him that John tendered his resignation. Well, that resignation tendering note triggered a punitive move on behalf of Shannon and David Lamb, and they filed a writ of levy, and they drained our bank accounts within 24 hours of that writ being submitted to the court. I was live on Pete Santilli's show when all our bank accounts were drained, as well as our 24-year-old son's bank account was drained because it was connected to John's. And that all happened, I think it was December 18th. So
what I find so egregious is this company SpyCloud is in the business of protecting your personal identifiable information. Yet
sure
they blew right past what the mission statement of their own company is.
Yes.
And they disclosed all of this to John's ex-wife, who is not even married to John anymore. I mean, this is clearly an egregious act. And
it totally is.
Right? It's completely, it violates, John's personal information, a Fourth Amendment right there.
Yep.
So you have put out a press release. I'm going through it. This is what's on the screen right now. But this press release actually is really well written. It cites right here. It talks about that under U.S. Code, common law of causes of action based on invasion of privacy, conspiracy, negligence, breach of duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, professional malpractice, conspiracy, breach of contract, tortious interference. Without a doubt, the doctrine of res ipsa loquitur applies here. 18 U.S. Code, subsection 1589, abuse of law or legal processes. Title 18, causing poverty to John Serena and his wife Maureen Serena, specifically 18 U.S. Code, subsection 1581, peonage, provides that anyone found in violation shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. And apparently there's 3 plaintiffs and over a dozen violations in state and federal law, giving you all a filing federal suit against SpyCloud for $6 million. Wow.
Yeah, there's case law that one of those tortious claims, with one person being harmed, they've gotten $1 million in damages. And we have 3 victims and over a dozen causes of action. It's gross. And it's also what's interesting is that SpyCloud works with a lot of the 3-letter agencies to stop human trafficking. They are the world's largest collector of dark web data. And the fact that they're participating or conspiring to human traffic John Serena, one of their employees, is particularly disgusting in my book, and so hypocritical. And they aided in stealing his property and undermining his rights when they really are claiming to be protecting people and their personal information and trying to stop crime.
Right. So this is getting back to the intersection of human trafficking and the courts in Colorado and the corruption that is coming out of there. And of course, we can also stop here and mention Donald J. Trump has been persecuted by the courts of Colorado. They're trying to remove him from the ballot. So all eyes on Colorado right now. It's critical that we look at this. Getting back to you, Dale, and the human trafficking element and what's happened to your family. Let's take it from the top with the just horrific story that runs itself into Colorado with respect to you and your children, and what Canada did and what Joe Biden and the state of Colorado has done to your family. And folks, brace for impact, because this is just beyond horrific.
Yeah, so at the beginning in early 2020, I uncovered a delivery system for biological weapons designed to look like a random outbreak for the HVAC infection controls for the pandemic. That's the first stage. So when you do that, that's high treason in Canada because it's an act preparatory to levying war. Same thing in the United States, it's treason. So I reported it to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which are the feds in Canada. They didn't do anything after they reported it. They actually constructed a narrative, and then I went to sue them. And when my daughter and I were going into court, instead of going into court, we got arrested and taken and tortured. I was strapped to a bed and drugged against my will to be and interrogated about the very delivery system that I uncovered. Canada had an obligation to turn that information over to the Americans because of the treaties, because
Right.
That's a critical weakness that an enemy could exploit. And so after eventually I was released, my daughter was released. I sent her over to the United States because I'm like, look, you're an Indian, you have a right to cross the border, get out of here because they're trying to kill us. Well, instead, Department of Homeland Security on October 1st of 2020, they kidnap her because that's the only word you can't touch an Indian crossing the northern border. And they kidnapped her, held her for 7 months until I pressured the Canadian consulate in California to confirm her Indigenous identity, which they did because ICE was concealing her Indian card so
What
that they could hold her there.
so what was their purpose of holding her? Were they saying she was an illegal alien, so they were detaining her as though she was an illegal alien crossing into the United States?
Yes, they acted like she was undocumented and forced her into immigration proceedings when
And
she had the right of entry.
and she showed them her card that she was an Indian.
Yes, she did.
Mhm.
And then
Incredible.
Canada confirmed it by letter, so they had to let her out. And
So
so,
so she was coming over to basically leave Canada because she'd already been persecuted in Canada. You had been drugged up and you said she's not safe here. How old at the time? How old was she at the time of this
23.
crossing? She was 23 when she crossed into the United States. And in October of 2020, DHS involved in this kidnapping of your daughter. You had another child as well. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so when I was strapped to the bed and drugged against my will, my family court was weaponized after I went ahead and reported this to the RCMP, and they settled my divorce hearing while I was being tortured. The same judge was overlooking the court hearing for the COVID issue and the family matter, and I got the house I was living in taken away like a white belt, completely financially cut off from my daughter. Keisha was cut off from her sister. And so I haven't seen my daughter since June 1st of 2020. And so, yeah, so I lost everything. And same kind of situation, kind of how like Maureen and her husband got ambushed completely. That's exactly the same element that you saw. And it was because you went against the government. So then after my daughter was released, I came to go across the border because, like, I mean, the RCMP were giving me grief, and I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. So I got a Canadian passport renewed, valid for 10 years. They took me like I was undocumented. They tried to intimidate me like a bunch of the officers having their hands in their guns, telling me to go back to Canada. I'm like, no, I'm not going. And I had 6 volumes of evidence that I was going to file in the Supreme Court to expose the treason. My daughter had came previously with the same evidence of treason, and that's why they kidnapped her. They did the same thing, took me to
Okay, so they
Colorado.
got a hold of the documents that your daughter was bringing across the border. That's why they held her as as an
Yes.
illegal. Okay. Okay, so just so that we're clear on the same page, you were bringing the elements of treason and how they were using aerosolized COVID delivery systems to spread COVID. You wanted to make sure you presented that to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, hoping to get it to the Canadian government for them to do something. And because of the treaties between Canada and the US, you expected that information to be reciprocated and sent to the United States. And nothing happened. Instead, they strapped you to a board and they tortured you. And then you sent your daughter across into the United States and they held her against her will, kidnapped, and they disregarded the fact that she could prove she was an Indian and was lawfully able to enter the United States on that fact alone. Do I have this correct?
Oh, yes, that's is correct.
Okay. Now, when you finally got into the United States, they obviously made it difficult for you. They recognized you were coming in with reams of paper and documentation proving what you had delivered to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Did they take that evidence away from you?
No, they actually tried to coerce me to get rid of it, and I told them no. And they refused to take it. They refused to do anything. They took me to Colorado. I was tortured, like subjected to psychological torture, was not fed, sleep deprivation, all this kind of stuff. And then I was sent back without any due process. DHS didn't even actually show up at the hearing, and the judge refused to take the evidence. I left it in the court. He said he didn't have the jurisdiction to deal with the treason. I said, you're an American because Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution says you have an obligation to deal with it. You can't see it and leave it alone. And so he refused to take it, and then they sent me back, and my daughter was continued to be trafficked as a result of this because of the
This is your youngest
conditions.
daughter.
My oldest
Your
one. She
oldest,
was
okay.
drugged and raped multiple times for profit to shut me up and to shut her up. And every time I went to try to go ahead and press forward with the complaint, they would take it out on her. And finally, she ended up in Colorado, where somebody showed up with rope, duct tape, weapons, machetes to come in and do her some harm. And law enforcement, like there's probably like about 40 different file numbers in Canada, United States, and they all keep ignoring them, courts and everything. And so there's a long history of the evidence of the courts concealing human trafficking, and not just in my case, I found it in many other cases, and was able to demonstrate and predict that the state courts are actually worse than the federal courts because of the states have more power and can get rid of the federal encroachment, and predicted that Donald Trump would be treated worse in the state court than the federal court, which was evident when he was denied an entire defense in the
Right.
state of New York.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Isn't that
Yeah.
just absolutely absurd what is happening right now? The breakdown of law and order is pervasive throughout all the 50 states, as evidenced by the fact that we've left our borders wide open when the states could have stood on Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 all along. And just now, magically, they're deciding to stand, Texas leading the way after Abbott's bust in millions of immigrants all over the country, as according to the WEF doctrine, to get these immigrants throughout our country and turn our country upside down, inside out. Maureen, listening to Dale's story, tie in to some similarities between what you and John have been basically subject to by the government of Colorado, the state courts, in addition to Spy Cloud, but tie it mostly into the government interference and abuse, frankly.
Sure, sure. I mean, John was completely denied due process. There was no service, no hearing, no nothing. They admitted, allowed perjury and fraud, even when they were put on notice. We sent in affidavits of truth. They actually, Shanna Cloak, one of the clerks at the court, we filed an affidavit of truth on her, which is in common law. And she actually filed the affidavit of truth into John and Shannon's 2011 divorce case, which is docket tampering. We immediately put them on notice, and she told us, we have the email, she told us to have our lawyer file something to get it removed. It's like, it was your error. It's a personal affidavit of truth to you. And the fact that Shanna Cloak is now a defendant, and we're in a prosecution she's the same one who signed off on that writ of levy draining our bank accounts after she was already conflicted out. So I wrote this huge complaint to Colorado Judiciary Disciplinary Board, and I had to cite all the canons that they violated. They send back a note after their investigation that they can't overturn, if we don't like the judgment against John, that has nothing to do with them. It's like, no, these are canons of law. You are trafficking. You are trading bonds on John. Here's your Dun and Bradstreet number. Here's the bonds you've traded on this case. All of that, they didn't address it at all and they just blew it off. But the interesting thing that did happen was when this complaint went in, all of the judges and magistrates that had been on the case were all removed instantly. And then 2 weeks later, on the same day at the same time, they all file a motion to recuse. So it's like, quitting after you got fired.
Right.
2 weeks later, so they know, but they're just messing around.
Yeah.
And, these family courts, I think it was November 29th, the Fifth Circuit Court heard arguments about these administrative courts, in particular family court, and how unconstitutional they are. And Gorsuch has already weighed in on it, and he believes that they are unconstitutional. And their final ruling is going to come out in June. And I'm anxiously waiting for that, because these courts are crime syndicates. Every judge on every bench throughout the entire country absolutely is committing financial malfeasance, in that they are trading bonds on every case, and therefore every judge has a financial interest in every case, and that just can't be. And that was one of the things I noted to the Judiciary Oversight Committee in Colorado. But as we all know, they all play in the same corrupt little sandbox, and these are crime syndicates, and they're not going to go down easy, which is what I have organized the nation and several nations in the process of organizing them with Operation Restoration to go after these courts and these crime rings and take them down.
Well, I feel like what you two are collaborating together on, because you share a common enemy, which clearly is the Colorado court system, but the
Mhm.
entire governmental process is totally inside out and upside down. President Trump is a great example of somebody who has not gotten a fair shake in any court system anywhere, including the Supreme Court, which is
Mhm.
supposed to be a common law court, by the way. So this is rather startling. It's truly an unbelievable story between the two of you. Dale, your story is just so horrific. I can't imagine talking about my own child in the fashion in which you've just represented both your children. You don't know where your youngest child is at this time, or do you have an inkling of where she is and possibly what's happened to her?
Well, they gave her to the mother, in order. This is why they weaponized the family court. I don't know if she's alive or dead. I presume she's still okay. I don't know. I've been cut off. I mean, I pay child support, but I have no way of seeing her. Like there's a no contact order while I was strapped to a bed, and I got no due process. There was fraud like crazy. Judges signed off on fraud, to sell my house that I was living in, to take everything that I have. And I mean, the courts were instituting actions against me. The clerks were doing actions against me. I got pulled into court, and I have video there of it online of nobody there, but the court pulling me in for hearing. And I'm asking, why am I here for? And because there's nobody else there, because the court brought me in. The court can't do that. And then they're trying to argue against judges who are doing the work for lawyers, and nobody ever brings in evidence. And I've got all this evidence. My daughter asked, why does a man who rapes me get to speak on my behalf? And the judge is like, I'm going to mute you. And they wouldn't let her talk. They never let her talk. They act like she doesn't exist. And it's horrendous. And the systematic nature on the way that the courts are being used to traffic human beings is treasonous in nature. It's designed to break down the fighting force of the men that would protect their children and stand up and organize the people, the former resistance, to break them down, to break down the women, to destroy the children while they're flooding the border with fighting age men. And in Canada, they're just flying them in. So they're preparing for an invasion for us to lose.
It's just so shocking. Can you, Ty, can you connect this to what we see happening with the January 6th defendants, Maureen, and then again tie it back in to how they've treated President Trump, so that people can see the common thread that's going through all of this? Because, again, this we all thought, oh, we're going to win in the courts. We thought, oh, we'll win in the courts. We've not won in the courts.
Yeah. And we're not going to win in the courts. They're corrupt. They're crime syndicates. So yeah, as far as the J6ers go, it was so brilliant when Tucker Carlson came out with the footage that I had seen and you had seen, Ann, like 2 years before, 3 years before, when it all happened. We knew that they were invited in and it was suppressed. So all this evidence that would have freed these people was kept from them in their own defense, and they were all denied their due process. This simply can't be. These are inalienable rights. These are not rights that a court can take away. These are rights given to you by God that no one can take away. And so these courts have gotten so high-handed, and the fact that you have to speak legalese to go into court. If you don't have $500 an hour to pay a lawyer who's part of the playing in the dirty little sandbox with everyone else, I mean, you don't even have a shot.
Right.
So, the J6ers didn't stand a chance. And I honestly don't think anyone does. I mean, look what they've done to President Trump. I mean, he's wealthy, he's powerful, and they are still coming for him. They gang up, and their whole point of what they do is to cause harm and to rip people apart, which is what they did to John and I, and to certainly Dale and his family. That is what they're designed to do, to cause harm and to go up against anyone that's going to go up against them. Anyone who's a truth teller, you are in their crosshairs. And that's why we need to all come together as a unit. We need millions of us joining forces and joining hands, and we need to move as an army and in a very intentional manner against them peacefully. But that's what I'm organizing with Operation Restoration, and we'll be announcing that very soon. But their days are numbered now because the people are wise to it. We've watched it unfold with J6 in particular, and certainly President Trump. Can you imagine trying to even having the audacity to say you won't be on the ballot? I mean, that is taking away the people's vote. I mean, who are you? You can't do that. And they just simply don't care. Their audacity just knows no bounds.
He hasn't even been convicted of an insurrection yet. Yet they're moving in advance as if he has. And it's
Yeah.
odd that the 14th Amendment would be weaponized in this faction, because the 14th Amendment was wholly unconstitutional. It was ratified under duress, and the last two states that caved after 2 years of trying to get it done were New Jersey and Ohio, and they did it under complete duress. And it was really stripping you of your sovereignty as an American,
Yeah.
a citizen of your state, and placing the crown of thorns I call the United States citizenship on your head, which has now rope-a-doped us into their rules, codes, statutes, and ordinances as they created corporate fictions of all of us, years down the road. So we have got a lot to atone for. We've got a lot to undo. But again, CPS is a crime syndicate. Our United States court system is a RICO crime syndicate, and they are trafficking people. They are profiting off these people, and they're really just adjudicating on crimes that they're committing themselves. And they're placing the blame right at our feet so that they can rape and pillage our bank accounts over and over and over. And frankly, the human trafficking element of it is so horrific. Dale, my sincere condolences to you and your family. And Maureen, of course, with what you all have been through. Your family has been, financially destroyed. Thank God still intact, but financially destroyed. So to that, our hearts, thoughts, and prayers go out to both of you. Calls to action, Maureen?
Yeah, I mean, my call to action is for everyone to watch the 18-hour marathon tomorrow, the Save America marathon, because, everyone needs to learn common law. And that is the next step in taking back our freedom and reclaiming our republic. Learn common law and stay tuned to Operation Restoration. We're going to have a lot of action items for the people to do, and to, take down these courts and hold these small players accountable. If you show them that they're operating in crime and in a crime syndicate, after they've been put on notice and they continue to do it, they're doing it willfully. And then we can take it to a whole different level. But that's what we need to do.
Great. And Dale, for you, what would you like to see folks take, move in what direction? Do you want them to visit your website? What can we do to help make sure that you're getting the support you need? Because this is a We the People effort. CPS has been violating people for decades in this country, and I know in Canada as well. So these stories are just horrific beyond description.
Yeah, my daughter started the Karis Project after her sister got stolen and so forth, and all this trafficking going on. And the word charis is the Greek word for grace, a divine gift. And I look at everything that me and my daughter's been through. It's only God that's helped us and given us the ability to have this information to help people. And it's tied Canada and the United States together so that we can come together and get these evidence packages to take people to task, put it in the hands of all of the people who committed crimes. And we've got 46 of the 50 states and the federal packages. We also have all of Canada, and we have the UK, and working on Australia and New Zealand as well. And we put a petition for redress of grievances into Michigan in the way that it was designed when the Constitution was written. And so people need to understand and how that works, that you have a right to redress. You don't have to beg or ask. You have a God-given right, and you have a right to your republic. And we're teaching this to the people and putting this into the hands of the people because it's your right to know how to protect yourself with the Constitution, to protect your God-given rights. And so we want every man, woman, and child in the United States and on planet Earth to know how to protect their God-given rights. And we're going to use the United States and their Constitution as the standard to judge the world. And they're going to see how the Constitution was constructed to protect the children.
Amen to that.
Dale.
Well said. Well, the two of you are phenomenal. Maureen, what you've got going on and the collaboration around the world with Dale and other countries, as Dale enumerated, is going to be absolutely spectacular. I'm really privileged to be sort of overseeing the media lane of that. So I'm grateful to be a part of this project, but I can think of no better people to do this with than the organization that you've assembled, Maureen, because you've just really, as always, know how to put it together. We all saw your work on the People's Convoy, and we look to seeing how this collaboration comes to life. And exactly, Dale, to your point, Canada has the Charter of Rights and Privileges, but you're right. The Constitution has always been the North Star for planet Earth, for all of humanity, which is why America has always been that shining city on the hill to which everybody wanted to come. And as long as they immigrated lawfully, we've welcomed people with open arms, but we've seen the complete collapse of law and order in this country, led by the meat puppet in the White House, who's a globalist meat puppet for the WEF, the World Economic Forum. And they're absolutely hell-bent on destroying America, because America stands in the way of a one world government. They need to destroy us, and they're doing everything they can. And you two, unfortunately, are examples of just how corrupt the courts are in order to achieve those ends. So thank you for standing, and thank you for bringing this education.
Yeah. Thanks
All
for
right.
having us, Dan.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
All right, everybody, that's a wrap. I appreciate you tuning in as always. Please share this out. This is critical information. You're going to hear a lot more about the People's Operation Restoration. It's coming. It's coming in a big way. And just like the trucker convoy that is traversing the country, and the people that are rallying around the sovereignty and basically defending their states, because gosh knows we can't depend on the federal government. I'm glad to see the states finally standing, but it's always you, the people, that have to stand first, because we are the government. Have a great evening, everybody, and good night. And don't forget tomorrow morning to tune in to the Save America Marathon starting at 8 a.m. It's live, 18 hours of nonstop broadcasting with me, Pete Santilli, Scott McKay, and LFA TV. All of us going to be joining forces with many of your favorite guests on here as we educate you, the people, on what we, the people, can be doing. It is our constitutional duty to stand up, learn about the grand jury process, learn about the militia, which is, of course, the enforcement arm for the people. These are the constitutional duties that we have, and they are constitutionally protected, not only by the Constitution for the United States of America, but also by your state constitution. Tune in 8 o'clock right here on this channel, or on the homepage of Rumble, where you will find us also streaming, along with a lot of your favorite Patriot broadcasters, simulcasting to get this information out to you tomorrow for 18 hours. You can text TCM to 844-837-5132. We'll see you on that. Also want to thank our Patriot sponsor at lightsoutbeef.com. Get on over to lightsoutbeef.com if you want to make sure you have a steady stream of beef, delicious beef protein, freeze-dried for your family, shelf-stable up to 20 years. Use my name, Ann, A-N-N, at checkout and save 10%. Also, Richard Nutritional Store, rncstore.com, Richard Nutritional Center Store, rncstore.com. Use promo code AV at checkout, save 10% there as well. You're going to find delicious apricot seeds. You're going to find Latril B17 supplements and other goodies to ensure that you are healthy, wealthy, and wise. Get on over to rncstore.com, promo code AV. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, everybody, hope you have a blessed evening.